Community Coordinator for the Academic Data Science Alliance, or ADSA for short. And ADSA is a community of leaders, practitioners, and educators who take responsibility for a just and equitable future where data science approaches are thoughtfully applied in all domains for the benefit of all. This career panel series is brought to you by the Career Development Network. The Career Development Network, or CDN, is a sub-community within ADSA, and it's for those who are in the early stages of their career. The CDN cultivates connections between community members and provides resources for jobs and research and professional development. If that sounds like something that you want to be a part of, then I hope that you will join. And I'm going to turn it over to you all to introduce yourself. So Matt, I will start with you. You want to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks for that. So my name is Matt Dakolios. I am a relatively new data scientist in the field. I was a math teacher for about 15 years, middle school and high school, anywhere from pre-algebra all the way through AP calculus and AP statistics. So I grew up wanting to be a teacher, really enjoyed it. And then right before COVID hit in spring of 2020, I applied for and was accepted into the UVA School of Data Science. And so got my master's online while I was working full-time as a teacher through the pandemic, while student teaching kids at home on distance learning. And so that was a challenging season in my life, but definitely can speak to being a career switcher. And I've found an opportunity now, a couple years into the field, to still be a teacher. I've been able to teach one high school elective class called Intro to Data Science in the school that I was at previously in Charlottesville. So, but I'm working full-time at Crutchfield Corporation, which is a national audiovisual car stereo, home stereo company here in Charlottesville. So, but like I said, I've been able to still teach, a couple classes a week, which has been a lot of fun.
It's incredible. We'll have to circle back and ask you for time management tips, because I don't know how you did that. Libby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Libby Heeren. I am a freelance data scientist right now. That means I get to work with different people on different projects. I do lots of Shiny app development as part of my sort of core data science work. But I, like Matt, really wanted to figure out how to teach, because that really needs to be in my life. I tutored all through undergrad and grad school, and I didn't want to lose that. So last month, I started working with R for the Rest of Us. I don't know if anybody out there has heard about it. It was founded by David Keyes. He's a wonderful person, and it's all about teaching R to people who don't need to use it for statistics, because there are so many people who can use R who don't need to do machine learning or modeling. And even though that's my background, I'm really, really excited that there's somebody out there who is teaching R for those people who sort of fall through the cracks. He was an anthropology PhD, I think, right? He didn't learn R in his school program. So that's a really big part of my life, and I'm really excited about it. I might go back into full-time work in the future, probably in the next few months, probably move back into full-time. And I am sort of a late bloomer as far as college goes. I didn't get to go to university until I was in my late 20s and early 30s. So I too ended up in a graduate program during the pandemic. The pandemic started in my last semester of undergrad. It was pure panic. And definitely did not anticipate being online for grad school. So that colored a lot of my experiences.
Okay, thanks for sharing that with us. Colleen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Colleen Smyth, and I am currently a high school math teacher and department lead, which I was also doing while getting my graduate degree in the same year that Matt was, in that 2020-2021 school year, teaching online, taking classes at night. So I went into a grad program in data science for two reasons. One, I was hoping to up my skills for the current classroom and give myself the ability to pivot if I decided that teaching was no longer something I was interested in. But luckily for me, I am still loving it. So I'm sticking in the classroom, but our state, Oregon, is currently currently implementing new math standards that have a renewed focus and emphasis on data reasoning and statistics. So I'm really excited about that work and really trying to push it forward at my specific school and in my district. So I also teach an intro data science class at my school and looking at options to create a dual credit data science class in the future as well.
Okay, so I am going to go back to you, Colleen. Do you want to share a little bit more about what you studied in undergrad and how you became interested in data science?
Absolutely. So I have an undergraduate degree in history with a focus or emphasis in American ethnic studies. So pretty different than what I do now, although there's a lot of great connections there as well. I ended up kind of falling into teaching math and realized that I loved teaching math and thinking about math in more people-focused ways. And so I think data science is a really great way to introduce students to the ways that math can be useful and to think about like the real world connections and how numeracy really does influence everything that we do and how we see the world. So I love translating that history knowledge and that background into a math class. And I feel like data science and statistics give me the opportunity to do that in ways that are really powerful for my students, and being able to make those historical connections for kids is really great and really helps it feel like math class is actually something that's useful for them. So yeah, that's kind of where I was coming at it from. When I originally went into teaching, I always knew that I wanted to start as a teacher, but when I was leaving college, I thought that at some point I might want to switch into public policy work. So I always thought right around year 5 to 7 or so would be when I'd kind of transition. And so that doing an evening program that allowed me to work full time and take classes in the evening and complete the program in 1 year, it allowed me to move over in the salary scale for teaching. So I'm earning more money now as a teacher than I was before. It gave me some really relevant skills toward teaching any class, but specifically for teaching my intro to data science class. And then it also gave me options if I did decide I want to pivot, or if I later decide I want to pivot. That's something that I have, although I don't think I will.
My school story, my undergrad school story is really, really long and spread out because when I was college age, when I was 19 or 20, I tried to go to college, but my life was really, really tumultuous. I was a young adult during the Great Recession, right? So lots of moving, lots of job losses with both myself and my husband. And so by the time I was about 28, I had scraped together like 18 credits over that time. I had been to a bunch of different community colleges. I would start a class and then end up having to move and take an incomplete in it. Like just really, really frustrating experience. But I got to the point in my late 20s where I was able to quit my full-time job, get a part-time job at a tech company, which was wonderful because I could work remotely. So I started working remotely in like 2015 and going to school part-time. And at that point, I was just a straight business major because my first goal was just getting an associate's degree. I had no thoughts of master's. I had no thoughts of anything but just getting through an associate's degree in business. And then when I went into the last half of undergrad, I was a finance major. I kind of figured I have a background in banking and insurance, and that's what I'll do. But then I took my first stats class and I immediately changed my major. So got into stats 1, realized it was exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and went to my advisor and changed my major. So I changed my major to management science, the smallest major inside of my university, which is the University of Texas at San Antonio. And it is also known as decision science. Usually people talk about it as decision science, not management science. So it has sort of bits and pieces of some different areas like statistics, like operations research. So there's mathematical optimization. There is calculus and applied statistics and all kinds of things, and programming, all in service of solving business problems, because I went to the College of Business at UTSA. So that kind of that path was absolutely not something I could have anticipated for myself ever, because in high school, I was not a math person. It wasn't until I got into those undergrad math classes that I even realized it was something I liked and could do and really excelled at. So give yourself a chance out there if you don't think you're a math person. You might be.
This is great because one of our questions from someone who registered for the panel did ask if they needed to have like a computer science background in order to get into a data science master's program. And the answer, judging by you two at least already, is no. Now, do you want to share a little bit about your interest in data science, what you studied as an undergrad?
Yeah, I had zero. If you could have less than zero experience in computer science, that's what I had. And so I could speak to that later as well about, sort of what you look for and prerequisites. I was good at, like, I was math centered in high school. That was what I liked. But I didn't have a lot of guidance as a high school student about what to major in. And my mom was a third grade teacher and my dad was an engineer. So I narrowed it down to being a high school math teacher or being an engineer. And I just didn't think being an engineer would be, I thought it would be boring, and I liked people. And I really wish I knew. I mean, I loved my time as a teacher and I still teach now and I love it, but I really wish I knew about data science then. This was in, I graduated high school in 2002. So I don't know if I don't think you could take that anywhere. I think you could just take computer science classes probably. So, I went the math statistics route, and wasn't really until I started teaching AP stats that I started to think about data as a field. And it just wasn't something that was even on my radar. And I also like sports a lot. And so in the last 10 years, sort of analytics has been a hot thing in pro sports. And so I guess just from watching sports and knowing that teams are doing more with data, started to think about data science as something that I could do for a living. But I think that's what's great about and Colleen talks about teaching data science in her school, and what we're doing in our school is that, I just had our first class on Tuesday and I told them, the whole point of this class is to give you a taste of data science to see if you want to do it after this. Because none of us had that. We didn't have the ability to minor in data science or take anything like that. So, I tell students, like, just take a coding class if you're anywhere near interested in math or science now, because it's just becoming more and more prevalent. But did I have a computer science background? No. And I have advice for people that have zero experience like I had. We could talk about that later if we, what advice would I give somebody. But I was very traditional math statistics background and had to learn everything else on the fly.
Yeah, actually, let's hop into that now. So you talked about taking a coding class. Is that the class that you would recommend that folks take as kind of like an introduction to data science, or would you point them somewhere else?
Yeah, I would. So I actually had to end up taking one to get into the program because it was one of the prerequisites. There were about 4 prerequisites: I think calculus, statistics, an intro to computer science class. So I had to take one online in about a month or two as I was applying. So I would recommend, because there's so many free classes that you could take through, MIT Online or Coursera. There's just so much out there. That's edX, I think, is one, right? There's so much out there that's free. And so I would do that. Just if you don't like it, if you just can't stand their intro to coding class, then that's also information that maybe, you need to do something that has nothing to do with coding and all. And I kind of tolerate it, especially at first. I kind of just tolerated coding. I didn't love it. I didn't dislike it. I just saw it as a means to an end, and to some degree I still do. And then I would say maybe if you have 3 or more months, register for like a data camp account or someplace like that, where you can take, and I still do that today, find a platform like that where you can sort of take skill-based courses in bite-sized chunks that might take 5 hours total, where you can learn a specific skill and just try to build. So, I went to UVA data science school, and they kind of gave us like, these are the skills, these are the topics, and just kind of be self-aware about what you don't have. I didn't have to beef up on statistics, but a lot of people in the program did, and that's what their weakness was. We came in with people that were computer scientists and programmers, and they were horrified at the thought of a p-value. And so I was the exact opposite. So it's just sort of like, you have to know who you are, what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and then just try to spend some time before you enter the program to build some confidence. I mean, we could talk about imposter syndrome. Like, I still to this day have, feel like an imposter in this field to some degree, but that's just because I didn't have a coding background. But I just, you get through it. If I could, anyone could, in terms of my master's program.
My experience is a little bit different because my undergrad was actually super data sciencey. My undergrad in decision science was machine learning and applied statistics. I learned R, I learned SPSS syntax, I learned SAS coding, I learned SQL. So I came out of my undergrad just super, super prepared to do a master's in data science. And then in my master's program, I was actually kind of bored because my master's program started at 0 for a lot of people. It took a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds, and it needed to get everybody kind of up to the right level. So I agree with what Matt said about knowing yourself and knowing where your kind of struggle spots will be, because I had the same experience with having other people in my cohort, watching them struggle with their deficits, like watching them really struggle in stats if they had a stats deficit, or watch them really struggle in programming if they had a programming deficit. One thing that I did is I knew from the syllabus, I could tell that I was going to end up using Python, and I hadn't used Python in undergrad. So I went and took Harvard's CS50 course. I did it through edX. I highly recommend it. It's updated every year. So every year that Harvard teaches this course, and it's an amazing course, you get fresh content. You also get graded assignments. I mean, you get a coding environment on, I think it's through GitHub, and you submit whole assignments, you have homework. It's an amazing resource. If you are not using CS50, go look at it. They also have CS50P now, so that's just in Python. But in my CS50 class, I learned C, basic programming in C, which was extremely helpful. And I also learned basic programming in Python and some SQL. So I felt way more prepared when I got to that in my program. And I would highly recommend that for anybody who needs sort of a boost in that summer before fall classes start. That would be my go-to. And then if you need a gentle introduction to statistics, I recommend Brandon Foltz on YouTube. I kind of joke that YouTube is like the university of YouTube. I feel like it absolutely is. I don't know anybody who does data science who does not religiously watch YouTube videos about stuff that they want to know. So go check out Brandon Foltz. He's amazing. All of his content is very, very well explained, very deep. His playlists are super long. You get to go really in depth into a topic. He's a wonderful lecturer, and he's extremely encouraging.
So I think a couple of things. I think that one of the things that is good to think about for any grad school program is to what extent does it keep your doors open and your options open? Because I think that sometimes we get really set on a particular career path or thought for ourselves, and then we do a grad program that only allows you to do that one thing. And I think one of the cool things about data science is it's applicable in so many different fields that there are 101 million different ways you can go at the end of it. And so I don't think that by choosing that, you would necessarily be cutting yourself off, but I think it is important to think about, is it a data science program that you want, or is it, and is it an actual master's degree, or is it like you just want some skills like that you could do in a certificate. And a lot of programs have a certificate option that can turn into a master's program. And so that's something that I would look into as well, is what does the university that you're looking at, or the universities you're looking at, offer in terms of partial completion? And maybe that's just, okay, I'm going to take 2 classes first term, see how I like it. And then, because I think once you have that coursework on your resume, and more importantly, those skills, knowing R, knowing Python, whatever it is, that is what really is the important part, less so than the letters after your name, et cetera, et cetera. And then I would just echo what Matt and Libby said. I think part of knowing what you need to focus on if you're going into a program is knowing, one, who is your program targeted for, right? Is it a program that expects you to have prior knowledge like Matt's program, or is it more of an all-comers welcome, which is how my program was at Willamette University? It was designed for people who didn't have a data science background. We weren't expected to know anything about coding. They just said, make sure you have R Studio downloaded, and then we'll go from there, right? But the statistics piece is something like just at least the basic level of statistics. If you don't know what a standardized score is, what a log transformation is, like those kind of ideas. I mean, even simpler, let's go to middle school. Like, do we know what mean and median are and how they're different and how they're calculated? Do you know what it means if data is skewed or symmetric, right? Those basic statistics concepts are actually incredibly important. And I found that even though my program was designed for everyone is welcome, I was fine because I was teaching AP statistics, but a lot of my classmates really struggled with some of those concepts because they had taken statistics, maybe 10 years ago, if at all. So I do think that basic stats knowledge is important no matter what your program is, but what else you may need to do depends on who your program is targeted for and what your learning style is. Do you want to pre-learn? Are you pretty quick at picking stuff up? That kind of thing is important to think about too.
Yeah, that's great advice. Circling back to you, Colleen, about what you said about the graduate programs. Do you want to share a little bit about how you chose your graduate program, and then share some advice around what folks maybe should be looking for when they're searching for programs to apply to?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I had always thought I would go back and do some kind of grad program that had a little bit more of a quantitative bent. I was originally thinking public policy, and then kind of got interested through teaching statistics in some like data analysis type courses. And then it just worked out really conveniently for me that my alma mater, Willamette University in Salem, Oregon, was starting a master's in data science program, and they were pinging it out to our alumni emails all the time saying, hey, we want alumni to apply to this. We want alumni to apply to this. And it happened to be a good time of that spring summer of 2020. Stuck at home a lot, had a lot of time to think, took a lot of long walks, and it was kind of a last minute decision where I was like, you know what, the application deadline is this week, let me just throw it in there and then we'll see how it goes. So for me, it was like I had been interested in programs, and this one kind of fell into my lap, being a university that I was familiar with, and I trust the professors and the quality of the courses that I was going to take. And it was designed for working professionals, so I didn't have to leave my job in order to do it. And that was really important to me too. And it was very cost effective. So all of those things really added up to where I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, this seems like all signs point to yes.
Yeah, I think mine was largely convenience as well. I had gotten a decade ago, I had gotten a master's from the University of Virginia in higher ed. And I live in Charlottesville. And so even though it was an online program, it was tempting to be local if I needed to be here. And it's a really good program. And as a career switcher, and I guess, alternative student, it was kind of the norm. I was in there with a lot of people who had families, a lot of people who were, career switchers, and because it was an online part-time program. So it was really good for what I needed. It was, like I said, it was challenging because I didn't have the computer science background, but as Colleen was saying, a lot of people did come in with statistics deficiencies, and we took a stats class right away, and people were coming to me asking for help, which was nice. And so I didn't really shop around a lot, but ended up in a place that really fit me nicely, which was great. If I were to, I think those are great recommendations that Colleen said. I don't know if this program exists, but if there's a program out there that kind of has two tracks where, like Libby said, you could sort of come in and maybe skip some of those intro things if you're more advanced, or if you need all those intro courses. I think that would be a great idea. I also, besides just asking about placement numbers and job placement numbers, which is really important that you need to do, and making sure it makes financial sense for you. The best thing about UVA's program for me was the cohort and the collaboration. And if I was on an island in that program, I truly would not have graduated. I just wouldn't have been able to do it. And so I would ask about policies on collaboration. And you might, if you ask the question, hey, do you allow collaboration? They might not know. That might be a professor by professor thing. And being able to link up with cohort members, with classmates early on, and work on assignments together. I mean, that's the real world too. You're gonna, when you're a data scientist, you're gonna work on projects together, and then you're gonna submit projects together. And so that was really important for me, because I had strengths and I had weaknesses, and we were able to work together on a lot of assignments and help each other out. And like I said, if I was on an island, I would have just hit wall after wall and not learned anything. But by collaborating, I was able to learn. I was able to turn in material that I understood. And so that's incredibly important. So what is the culture of collaboration? And maybe asking the question of, do you allow collaboration is a good one, but maybe do you prioritize collaboration or independence? And, sort of ask questions like that where you can get at the heart of, if you're entering a program that is run by computer science professors, it might be, no, you need to do your own work, and you're not allowed to work with anybody else. And I found that the more data science professors who have a background in that understand that half the time you're on Google or asking a colleague, how do I fix this error? I'm stuck, and helping each other out. So that would be, if I could do it all over again, I would make sure I asked that question. And luckily, I just found a program that was very, very conducive to working together and getting through it. And so for me, even though I didn't have a background in computer science, the biggest thing was that they told us, just put in the work, work together, put in the hours, and you're going to be fine. And that's how it was.
I was having flashbacks as Matt was talking, actually, because our computer science professors from the computer science area, our IS department, were the ones who were the most stringent about working together. I think that we all have a very similar story, because my choice was proximity and familiarity as well. I went to the same university for my undergrad and my graduate program. I had actually no plans of getting a master's degree. One of my marketing professors, called me to his office basically during office hours and said, "You are too smart to not get a master's degree. And you need to go meet these people, and you need to talk to them." And he marched me physically down to the graduate advisor's office and let me talk to her, and really, really helped encourage me. One thing that I really wish I had considered further was the speed of my program, because I had a choice between a part-time evening program and a full-time cohort. And I had eventually quit my job to go back to school completely full-time. I had really made that commitment once I started at my four-year university. I'm just going to do this. It's taking forever. I'm working part-time, going to school part-time. And I thought, okay, I can handle this. I can handle a full-time grad program. Full-time in grad programs is usually like 3 classes. That is a full-time load, and they don't recommend you take more than that. And I was taking 5 at a time. So if I had not had people to support me, I would have failed. And I also had not planned on going online. I had planned on being in person. The pandemic kind of threw everything out of whack. And my university had no plans for giving us a platform to communicate on, nothing beyond like discussion boards on Blackboard, which all teachers know nobody uses. So when I was going into the program, I knew I was going into it in the spring before the fall semester. And I started gathering people. I started with one person that I knew who was also applying to my program, got her in a group, just like a group me group. And that turned into a Discord cohort. I got in touch with the graduate advisor and said, hey, can you send this join link to everybody who gets accepted? And she said yes. And so even before the program started, I was gathering all of these people together. And that's something that I kind of always do. I'm a community builder. I'm a community builder now and I get paid for it, right? So it's something that I felt was really, really important to me and I knew would be important to other people. But that's something that I would check into when you were looking at grad programs is, are they online? And if they are, is there some way for you to be a cohort? Is there some way for you to meet people before things start? Because getting to know people, figuring out what their schedules are, their work styles, all of that stuff, really, really important because there are going to be classes where you have to do everything together. And my last semester, I had several classes where it was just group project after group project, every 2 weeks, a group project due. So I would say that social skills are actually at the top of my list for things that you should be working on developing before you get into your grad program. Yes, stats and statistics, you're going to learn that in the program. If you're deficient, you're going to be like working really hard on it. But the social skills stuff, if you don't come in hot with that in the beginning and prioritize that, it can make things a struggle. So as an introvert, I encourage you to work on that part. So yes, it was proximity. I already knew that department, I already knew the business school, and that was an easy choice. But the pandemic threw a huge wrench in things.
Yeah, okay. Well, so then kind of circling back to all of this and connecting it to now, I'll start with you, Libby. Do you want to share a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like and the skills that you learned from grad school and how you apply them in your day-to-day work?
Sure. Actually, the biggest skills that I use are Shiny development, which I learned in undergrad and like a little bit in grad school. And that really surprised me. I didn't think I'd be into app development. I didn't think I'd do any UI development at all. But Shiny is a really, really powerful tool that a lot of people are using. And that is that sort of area of communicating data to other people and building things that are useful for other people to use to democratize the data analysis part. That's really important in a lot of organizations. So my day-to-day is actually several hours of meetings, whether it's with people working on projects or community events. And I would really, really encourage everybody, build community into your weekly schedule, your monthly schedule, whatever it is. Get on community calls, get involved, have those connections with other people in your industry because they're extremely important, and make friends with them, not just shallow connections, make actual friendships with people. Yeah. I feel like I wandered from the point and I need a reiteration of the question. I'm so sorry.
No, that's great. That's perfect. +1 on the community. We're a community. Please join us. We are definitely here as a resource, and we're connected to a bunch of other communities that cross other sort of discipline specialties. So we can connect you if we're not the community for you, but everyone is welcome.
Yeah. Oh, you were asking about
yeah.
day to day.
Yeah.
Half meetings and community and half coding. The coding is inescapable. You can't get away from it. But that's why Matt said, make sure you like it before you jump in.
And it'll real quick emphasize first, just Libby's talking about social skills. And I mean, the social skills and community part, you think of you're on the computer all day, so you don't think of it as a social field, but it's so important in the master's program and then afterwards, and just finding your people early on and finding out what you can contribute. And you might think that, well, I'm not a stats expert and I don't know how to code, but there might be people that just don't like to write. And so you could take on chunks of writing and offer that. And you might be somebody's best friend because they hate writing. So it's just sort of find out what you can do that people maybe aren't good at or don't like to do, and contribute that way, and be as outgoing as you can be. That's the one thing I got to get better at, the community part, in terms of just meetups and just I have stayed in touch with the people that I was really close to in my master's program. But just being on LinkedIn and reaching out to people can be awkward, but that's why people are on LinkedIn, and as I discovered. And so just don't be afraid to be outgoing, because nobody thinks it's weird but you when you're doing it, when you're reaching out. In terms of my day-to-day, so I would say that 80% of my job day-to-day is SQL code. And so at Crutchfield, we own our own data, and we have data on people's activity on our website. And so I start with a question. So right now I am trying to work on figuring out why our return rate on our products is going up. So our return rate is about 10 or 11%, and that's going up historically. And so just trying to collect data on what people are returning, how many days after they're returning it. We have a 60-day return policy. And so one of our things that we don't, advertise is sometimes we let people return it after the 60 days. And so it's sort of collecting data on, well, what would it be if we held to that policy? And so just collecting data and starting with a question of, okay, how can we help our return policy? Collect data, and then I'll throw that into some Python code and build a model, and then output that into a table that maybe marketing can use and things like that, or we can make predictions on what people are going to look at next on our website and build our website around that. So it's probably 80% SQL, 20% Python. But if I don't understand the Python models that I'm going to use, then I'm not really, it's just data collection and data manipulation and not data science. So the 20% that I do of Python is really, really important. But like most data science problems, 80% of the work is going to be in the gathering the data and manipulating the data and getting the training set ready. So that's most of my job. And then I only have a team of 4. It's not a huge company. I mean, we have about 1,000 employees, but less than that. But it's a team of 4 data scientists. So as opposed to teaching, when I was talking nonstop all day, it's me interacting with my boss a lot and just bouncing questions off of him. And so it's a lot more low key than when I was teaching, which is one reason why it's good to get out of the house a couple times a week to go talk to high school kids.
That's great. How about you, Colleen? Do you want to share a little bit about your day-to-day and how that connects to your data science training?
I will share briefly because I know that my career path is not most people who are thinking about going into a data science degree. I mean, I spend my day with kids, right? And it's incredible. But part of that is that I am constantly gathering and analyzing data in my head. Like everything that a kid says to me is a piece of data. And so I think that like something that we don't always think about with teaching is that element of like, we are all as teachers, if you're good, you need to be a really great data analyst because you are constantly like intaking this information. And when I get to actually sit down at the computer and crunch the numbers, it's like very refreshing to be able to do that in a lot of ways. But there's a lot of data collecting and analyzing that I'm doing all the time as well. And I think like one of the things that I love about teaching data science is introducing kids to ways that they can see the world that might be different than how they think about it currently. And so I love being able to pull in the examples that I learned from my cohort, things that people did as their final projects, work that I know some of my friends from my program are doing in their current roles. All of that is really exciting to be able to show kids like these are the kind of career options you can have with data science. But really, I'm thinking more about the data science process as opposed to those technical skills in my day-to-day.
And so thinking about now and also thinking about your graduate program, is there anything that you would have done differently in your graduate program? Is there a class that maybe you would have studied harder in, or is there a class that you didn't end up taking and then you kind of wish that you had? Is there anything like that?
There was a visualization elective that I could have taken and didn't. And I think I would have loved to do more with visualizations. And the opportunities were there. I just didn't take advantage. And so, I would say, it's easy to say, well, I would do more SQL because I didn't do a lot of it in my program. And it's 80% of my job now. But I think that's one of the easier things to learn on your own once you're in the field. And when I interviewed, I was very upfront about, I understand very little of SQL. I've probably done it for a couple of weeks, and my boss now, the hiring manager, said, I mean, you don't really learn it until you're doing it, and so it's fine. Well, they fortunately for me, they kind of hired me based more on just my personality than my skills at the time, which was a good thing for me because again, I was even at that point when I was at the end of my program, was still very, very fresh in the field.
This is not exactly something I would do different, but one of the things about doing data science is it's very project-based, right? And generally, I know this was true of my program, but I've also heard it's true of other programs. You get a lot of choice in what kind of projects you want to work on. And there were people in my program who were not in current career fields. And so they were like maybe just leaving undergrad, not really sure what they were doing or what they were about. And so they did projects that were fine, right? But they didn't have the same level of like weight and gravity that some other projects did that were connected to people's current roles. So we had a lot of people in my program who were trying to improve their data science skills for their current role or company. And so they were able to use company data, or I did my capstone using graduation data from my school. And those kind of projects, I really encourage people to take those opportunities to explore, whether it's for your career or just for the stuff that you really care about, like figure out what is it that you really care about and try to do that. Don't just pick like, oh, I like movies, so I'm going to do a project about movies, right? It's like pick something that is of interest to you so that you're motivated to work on it, because it's really hard to balance school and life and work if you're working and all of those things. And that can become work that you put into a portfolio. And so when you're thinking about how do I showcase my skills at the end of this program, pick projects that are actually going to showcase your skills and your passions and your talents in a mature and beneficial way to you. Don't just pick things that'll like teach you the skills but not actually have the impact, because in data science it really is all about impact and how are you going to impact whatever role or field you're going into.
No, I feel like I would have done a lot of things differently, but they all boil down to one decision, which was doing that accelerated program. Because if I had been going slower, and I wasn't absolutely just harried and really, really stressed out, I would have been able to do things more thoroughly and make better choices. And one of those would have been different project data. I think I would have collected data myself. And I will share a story here that sort of echoes Colleen's, which is when I got into my my practicum program, like my master's program was a practicum program. So we had an internship at the end of it. I ended up being a 35-year-old intern. It was very interesting. But I got to meet a lot of really brilliant data science people. And there was a data science manager at the company where I was working who I got to chat with. And I was kind of really anxious about the boxes that I didn't check during grad school. I was like, oh, I didn't check all of these boxes, and all of these people want these things. You look at these job statements, these job recs that are just full of a laundry list of stuff, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't match any of those. Spoiler, nobody matches all of those. They are aspirational and absolutely crazy. But I sort of expressed this fear to her, like, how do I check all these boxes? How do I check more of them? And she said, you are thinking about the wrong thing. Like, you need to go figure out what you like and what you're good at and what you bring to the world, what you're passionate about, and then go do that out loud. And I wish I had been doing that all through grad school. I wish I'd been going more slowly so I could have had time to breathe and eat and sleep and do that stuff. But if you have the chance, start doing stuff that you are interested in, that's meaningful to you, with public data, or collecting data yourself. That's even better. Your apps on your phone collect a ton of data about you, and a lot of it you can download, do stuff with what you've got. But then put it out where people can see it, and put yourself where people can see you. because people are going to see you doing what you like out loud, and then they're going to find you and ask you to do it for them eventually. That's the advice I got. Eventually, I did take it and it did help. But no one's going to reach into your living room and tap you on the shoulder and give you an opportunity. You really, really have got to show people what you're passionate about. So Colleen's advice, absolutely, I agree with. That's what I would do different. I would have done more of that sooner.
Okay, so we have an audience question, which is how much or how little was ethics emphasized in your master's programs? Was it even mentioned, or were there classes that tried to weave it in, or was there a section on it?
I can speak to that. For my program, ethics was a huge emphasis. So that was actually one of our required courses that everyone in the program takes, is a data ethics course, which was really incredible. And it was also kind of nice to have one class that term that didn't focus on coding. It was a little bit of a break and a breather in that way. And we had some really great conversations in that class. I'm not sure we came to any conclusions, as any good ethics class would not, but I think it really prepared us to think critically about what the impact of our work is in the negative as well as in the positive, because anytime you are working with data and putting out a product, you really do have to think through all the possible ramifications and really think about how do you want to deal with that situation, and what are the limits that we want to self-impose with data. And then I would say, because that was a focus of the program and the design of the program, it also did come up in other courses as well. We were certainly encouraged to explore ethical questions throughout, but weren't necessarily assigned work on data ethics until that required course.
Yeah, very similar. It was a required course. It was 1 credit for 2 different semesters with the same professor. And it was a breath of fresh air, I agree, because it was discussion based. And then we took it about the middle of the program. And then after that course, we were expected to weave that into our projects to address data ethics in the projects that we were working on, address hidden bias, things like that we might not have thought about before, and the implications evolved. So yeah, I think it was really helpful to do it in the middle of the program and then have to address it afterwards, for sure.
I actually didn't have an ethics class in my grad program. We did not have anything that was set aside an actual whole class. I had that in undergrad. So everybody in the business school takes an ethics class. So ethics was very much on my mind as I went through it. And we did have it woven into other classes, especially applied classes. So if we had an applied stats class where we were going end to end for all of our projects all through the semester, my professor in that area had a background in medical research. So there was lots of ethics coming from him. I kind of wish that we had a standalone class, because it would have given me a break from 5 coding classes at a time, but I didn't. After I got out of grad school, I read a book called Weapons of Math Destruction, which is fantastic. It is an ethical discussion about data science specifically. So I highly recommend going and taking a look at Weapons of Math Destruction if you're interested.
All right, panelists. Well, is there anything that I didn't ask that you wish that I had? Do you want to share any last advice before we all sign off?
I feel like I have to mention the one thing I didn't mention in this discussion. I did not look into other options that were online, because my program, I thought it was going to be in person before the pandemic happened. But once my program was exclusively online and I got into that situation, I wish that I had gone and explored more options than I did. So go look around more than you are doing right now. Go talk to current students and past students, ask them how the program is the same or different, because programs change. They're all very new right now. They're like baby programs that are evolving. And that's something to really keep in mind, because the program you get might not be the program that somebody else got or that someone gets in the future. And price is important. My degree, I feel like, was pretty expensive, and there are some online options like Georgia Tech, which cost less than mine and are a little bit more flexible. So it's okay to be critical of those things and not just stick with your comfort zone, which is what I did.
That's excellent advice. Matt, Colleen, do you have anything to add? Any last words?
No, I mean, I guess, make sure that you are marketable and make sure that you're entering a program with a track record of placement. I think the first job you get is probably, and I got lucky because I found a job that was local that I really like the company, but most likely the first job you get is going to be one that just is placement for you. And then you kind of have, those few years to build up your skills to maybe on the side, think about what am I not doing at work that I want to build up and work on those on the side. And then sort of look ahead, after your first 3 to 5 years or maybe even less in that role, to think about where you could go, what community you could serve with data science, and really kind of get ambitious once you get your foot in the door. For me, being a career switcher was about, I just need to get my foot in the door. I need to get a job. Again, I got lucky because I love the company I work for at Crutchfield. But I just need to get a job. I need to get my foot in the door. I took the first job that was offered to me. I love it. And then it's about, okay, let's use this to sort of think about what do I really, really want to do in this field? Who do I want to serve? Really kind of hone in on what work do I want to do that I can really enjoy.
Colleen, do you have anything
Yeah,
else you want to add?
I would echo a lot of what both of you said. I do think it's really important to think about whether you want to go into data science to further the work that you're doing in your current field, or if you want to go into data science as a way to explore a lot of different fields. And I think that a master's program in data science can do both of those things for you. And I'm not saying you have to decide exactly what it is before you go in, but I think different programs have different focuses or foci. And so I think like my program was very much tailored toward people who were currently working. And so I think some of the people who weren't in career yet, who were straight out of undergrad, maybe struggled with some of the way that our courses were set up in that sense, because we did have a lot of opportunity where we were encouraged to use data from work if possible. And so a lot of people were working on their work projects as well as their school projects, so they could get away with doing schoolwork during the workday, right? And I think that's really helpful, and that's how that program is designed. But there are other programs that are more about the technical skills and showing you the variety of things you can do with data science. And my program did some of that, but it wasn't the focus. And so I think if you're thinking about what kind of program to go into, think about, am I straight out of undergrad still figuring out what I want to do? Or am I like happy in the career field that I've chosen and I just want some more technical skills? Because those are two kind of different focuses. And I think different programs do tailor toward those two different things.
Great, thank you. That's all very great ending advice. Yes. Michaela, do you want to jump on and talk about our annual meeting?
I actually just wanted to say thank you so much to all of the panelists for your really honest and practical advice. I'm sure that the students who watch the recording will get a lot out of it. And yes, I have a shameless plug in the chat. Our annual meeting, our first in-person annual meeting, because we launched during the pandemic, which is difficult to community build, as Libby, I'm sure you know, virtually. So we're very pleased to finally have an in-person meeting, and it's at UTSA. So I don't know if you're still in the area there, but please come by. Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And we do try to encourage students, master's students, undergraduate students. There's even going to be a couple high school students presenting posters. So getting at that sort of professional development and communication skills, it's a great way to showcase on your resume to a future employer that you know how to communicate your data science because you've presented at a conference. So I'm just going to leave that as a shout out. The link to the meeting is in the chat and registration is still open. So thanks again, panelists. Thank you for joining us and for all of your sage advice and wisdom.